All those cuss words that I was hearing during the break, please keep them to yourselves, and we can have a fruitier conversation later. But thank you all for hanging around and for coming to the second part of our session tonight. We have with us as well the wonderful Louis McNally. Louis, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. About 7:30. That won't do Louis any justice, so I hope you can bear with me a little bit, bear with us a little bit longer today, so we can give Louis a fair crack of the whip. I'm sure that you've all got some wonderful questions for him as well. So just by way of introduction, inspired by the 1980s, Louis' distinctive paintings, and as some of you have noticed, we've moved a little bit to the left so we get a little bit more of Louis' work behind us here. His distinctive paintings feature fine detailing and observation coupled with unique haunting qualities. Maybe that's something that we'll pick up in conjunction between the two of you later on. He also has a very distinctive and recognisable style of oil painting, which has been painstakingly developed over years, many weeks indeed, when he works on these particular images using drawings, photography, and his own memory. And the result, I'm sure you'll agree, is often emotive and atmospheric landscapes and cityscapes with long, low horizons. So, Louis, thank you, and welcome. Perhaps you could give us a little bit more of an overview based on that introduction.
Yeah, I mean, everything that was said is true. The city ones and the sort of landscape countryside ones, they come from different angles. The city ones, I lived in the city for a while. You get used to it, you know. It can be a haunting place. This one here of the Cowgate, which started off as this one here. So it started off as that, which was doing jury service one morning, early in the morning.
Yep, just lift up so we can see the people at home watching, you can see that as well.
Early in the morning, got to jury service, and it just caught my eye. And I've known this building for a while. I used to have a studio in the Cowgate before it was burnt down, and so I know that area quite well. Anyway, I kept seeing it, and there was something haunting about it. In Edinburgh, like Leith, it's got a sort of both. It's got old and new sort of put together, and I do like the Gothic quality that it has. You see it maybe a couple of times. You take pictures, you maybe do some drawings, scale them up, and then you try and put all that together when it comes to actually doing the piece. So, I mean, photography can sometimes be a slave, you know. You can end up putting everything in, and I think that is something that you sort of learn, and it's something maybe I was guilty of. You could put loads of detail in things, like loads of detail, in the hope that this thing's going to work because you've put a lot of detail into it. But in the end, to get it to work, you find out you're actually painting out the detail, you know, because you want it more general as about, you know, being too specific. And so these came about with that. The other one, the city one, which was a place which it's a view from the top of the ocean terminal. And many years ago, when we took driving lessons, I was taking driving lessons, we used to sit up there and the driving instructor would have his piece. And so we would look out there, and I thought that was I'd never seen that view. And it got me interested in painters. I think the City Art Centre done a show maybe 20 years ago where it was a collaboration of views of Edinburgh, and it was from all artists from the 1700s right up to modern day, and it did make me interested in finding the idea of how certain places have changed, you know. And so I think some of the views, if you go across to Fife and you look across and you see the shoreline, that hasn't really changed, it's basically the same. But as you come into town, some of the old, like I think it's down Broughton Street, and you see a painting 1700s, and it's sort of, now they've got some of the buildings are originally there, but now they've built an office or something there. So you just get this huge sort of blank space office building, and you can't actually see any of the rest of it, but you can maybe see a wee toppy, something like that. And so that gives you ideas for compositions, and I do like the idea that views change over time, and some of these offices get knocked down and something else will go in, and the view changes again, and so it's always moving. And like I say, Edinburgh, like Leith, is a place where you've got really old buildings next to really modern buildings, and things like the tenements, they're just you've got to think although it's one big block, that there's so many flats in there with so many different people living in these places, and I think the atmosphere to try and get all that together, it does take a lot of work, and it does take a lot of sort of detail, but like I said, in the end you're trying to create some sort of mood, some sort of, no, it's not just a Gothic mood, it's a sort of a representation that somebody will remember, it'll stick in your head, and so I still paint various aspects, and I still sometimes you'll go, especially with all the developments going, you used to be able to see a gable end, and then now when you walk by, that gable end's gone because there's a building there, and it was like, that was such a beautiful gable end, nobody's going to see that now, and vice versa. You walk and a building's been knocked down and you think, oh, that's a new angle, so it's always changing, and there is always new views of Edinburgh, Try to think of anything else that could be important, but the Edinburgh ones, influences, you had mentioned Hopper, that was mentioned. I do like Hopper, but he's never been I never think about him when I'm painting. It could be it's sank in so deep that I don't know, but I do like Hopper, but no, really, I do like more of the sort of iconicness, although Hopper's got that as well, but I suppose maybe more Gothic, I think, maybe that's what I'm going for.
The background is kind of tantalising in both of those. You can't quite see it, but it's there.
Yeah.
Particularly in the Cowgate, because you can walk along the Cowgate and all of a sudden you can see forever.
Yeah.
And the same in that one, it's kind of there, but it's kind of out of focus.
Yeah.
I like the foregrounds, but I really like the way they go.
Yeah, I think that's got something to do with contrast as well, just in the sense that one place is vast, another place is so crowded, and maybe it's the use of trying to take your eye into the painting as well, that you sort of, you just see. I used to stay in Wallingford, and always when you're sort of in town, it's quite funny looking back to where you've came from, and because there's a couple of really good views. I think I've maybe done one painting where you see sort of the old is it the Academy that they were going to use as Parliament at some point, and then you've got Edinburgh's Disgrace, and then you look right out and you see the Bass Rock, and then you see away down there and you think, geez, there's, all that connection and all that life,
I love that about Edinburgh, that you can just keep walking.
Yeah.
And suddenly it explodes into
Yeah.
a horizon, and I think you really captured that in that one.
The other thing I liked about that was, and I was telling Robert earlier, was I'd shown this in a gallery, and I knew that the bottom where the light comes in, that was a hostel for sort of homeless hostel, and I liked the idea. I think I'd been a couple of times, and I liked the idea the second time I went, there was a tenant's van, it was either making a delivery or whatever, but it was pulling out of the hostel, and then somebody had seen that in another gallery and had mentioned, he was a judge, and he says, oh, that's where we have our, that's where they wait, and they have their quarters and that there. So you had the office above where all this law and stuff was going on, and then down below you had this poverty and desolation, and I did like the idea. That's why the bigger painting came about. I did like that contrast to that, just the men's experience, life experience between nothing and a lot, and so that really gave me the idea to do the bigger one, and I think that's the other thing, is that if you visit friends in town, and it's another thing, you look out their window and you go, oh, that's a cracking view, I've never seen that view before, you know what I mean? And sometimes ideas come like that, but sometimes ideas come, I've walked along the same bit so many times, but it's just the way the light hits it, and you think, oh geez, I've never seen it like that before, and you get a wee sort of moment, and you think, and maybe that's the thing you're trying to convey as well. You're trying to convey a sort of feeling, so the city ones are sort of like that. The countryside one, the bird ones, are sort of similar to that as well. You're trying to convey, I think I'm trying to convey some sort of human experience, With these ones, and especially this one, the idea was that somebody had said, and it sort of made me aware of it, about how vulnerable the birds were, and they were, if you're ever going to walk along a hedge and the birds all fly up, and as you walk about, they move further on and they move further on, they're always twitching, and the beautiful wee creatures, so delicate, but yet they've got a sort of strength about them. And the idea of this one was they were trying to come together in a sort of stillness, but the elements were blowing them about. And normally, I think, in some of the skies that I do, they're quite expressionist sky. Whereas that one, I was trying to express the wind, but I was trying to design the wind, if that makes sense to you. I was trying to sort of design it in a way that it wasn't just expressive. It was sort of had a completeness to it. I think that's what I was trying to do. And somebody had mentioned before that, especially some of these ones, that they almost look like musical notes. And I thought that would be great if you actually could put them in a quotation, like some sort of bird song, So you were not only were you looking at nature, because it is a sort of celebration of nature, but not only were you looking at it, but you were looking at a tune as well. And I love that idea, I like the idea that, and even if you didn't know about it, you're still looking at it,
It looks like they know there's a storm coming in both of those.
Yeah.
Like they know something we don't know.
Yeah, I think again with the birds, it is like trying to express how sometimes in life it feels as well to be so vulnerable, against the elements. It might not be the elements you're vulnerable, it might be something else you're vulnerable to, but you do feel vulnerable, and it's trying to suggest that in them. And again, living down the East Coast, you get huge skies, and it's and Scotland has got just amazing skies, even in the city it's got some cracking skies, and so you're trying to, the idea that we're all sort of living in nature, and we're all trying to survive, some of us are trying to get together and talk and, communicate, some of us are just trying to have a rest, but the life just keeps bashing at your door, and I think that was all that, and is trying to be representational, in wildlife, I suppose,
Yeah, it shows through.
The other ones, which were these type of things, which was the more Highland and Island type things, was basically based on taking the kids when they were many years ago, taking them, went to Fort William, and then we got the train up to Malaga. And as you went through, there was all these wee islands, and they reminded me of wee villages and people, and I suppose the trees become people, they're like, they're the figures in it, and so they're isolated, and there's maybe 3 or 4 of them, in the one lake or loch, and I like the idea that they were just isolated on their own with their own wee group, and there's this landscape that's out there that is rough and, you know, a difficult place to live in, and yet they survive, you know. And I think some of the landscapes now, I invent them, you know, they're not actually places anymore, they're just an invention of the Highlands. It's you know, a hill with rocks in it, and eventually when you do so many of them, you begin to go, oh right, I know that it's going to curve there, I know it's going to round there, and so that's how they came about.
Thank you. So for anybody who doesn't know the Fort William Mallet train, it's the Harry Potter one.
I recently took it, so when I sort of like, oh, I think I've seen it, and when you said exactly where, like, I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just there as well. I mean, you get them in Loch Lomond, and you get them in various places, and they just seem to grow. And you get different types of trees as well with pines. But I do like that long. It gives you a chance to sort of almost centralise your idea by using these long sort of and putting them right in the middle of the composition. You know.
There's a couple of things that I'd like to pick up on with you. I think I'll start with realism.
Yeah.
Now, there's a theory in aesthetics that says you can't paint every single blade of grass.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at, particularly at your landscape paintings, and to an extent your cityscapes as well, how do you determine just how much level of detail you feel you want to get into?
Well, I mean, if you know Durer's Turf, you know, and he did paint every blade of grass, you know, and I think there's, I mean,
Macintosh Patrick is
Macintosh Patrick's another one, yeah, and Andrew Wythe is another one, who are realists, but they've got a quirkiness about them, you know, they're not just realists. And I mean, I do like realist art, but I don't want to be a realist. You know, I think there's a place between real and, say, the Impressionists say, you know, there's a place in between there. I want to suggest a sort of realism, and I like the idea that a viewer is drawn in by realism, but that's not what the picture's about. It's not about, especially the birds, and I think the middle one there is Fabricus, you know, yeah, you know, he painted the finch.
Right, yes.
So, you know, so you can get a sort of realist or a classical painting of a bird. I don't want that. I want to suggest a bird, but I don't want it to, you can count every hair on it, because that detracts from, a bit like why you asked me earlier about why you don't have people in the landscape, in the cityscapes, is because it detracts from what you're trying to do. And if you have something too realist, you end up just focusing on that, and it doesn't give you a whole picture. And to be fair, for me, some realist pictures, they're like photographs. I look at them once, and I don't need to look at them again. I've seen, they've told me everything that I want, you know, and so that's it. Whereas if there's another element, where it be paint, tone, feeling, you know, whatever it is, if there's something else in it, then it just keeps you, you know, if you, and especially if you're living with these things, you know, if you're living, somebody buys your picture and it's up on their wall and they see it every morning. Some people can live with a realist painting, you know, they'd look at it, but I like the idea that somebody will come in and go, oh, I never noticed that before, you know, or that wee quirky bit, or there's something, I like the idea that it sort of changes, just like it changed for me when I was painting it, you know. That fresh look at it, you know, but the idea is that realism doesn't allow you sometimes to be emotional, you know, and you want to be, I want to be a particular emotion that I want to try to express, and so realism sometimes cuts that out, so there comes a point where you stop being like every blade of grass, you know.
Tell us about that.
This one I was just explaining about, I was just explaining about taking the train from Ullapool to Malaga. And as you go through all these wee lochs, you know, but not just there, even in Loch Lomond and stuff like that, you get these wee islands with trees in them, and they just reminded me of wee family units on their own, and just with their own wee thing, and ecosystem almost, you know, their own wee, and against this landscape that can be quite, it's not horrible is not the word, can be quite harsh is the word, you
I
know.
like the way there's two trilogies against the harsh landscape. It's like almost evokes the Father, Son and Holy Ghost kind of.
Right, I remember doing a portrait of my wife and my first son when they were born, and it was just as Bern was born, and somebody says, "Oh, it's very Catholic," you know, and I thought, yeah, that's not bad. I quite like that. There's a sort of something else about it, you know. There's an acknowledgement that there's something else out there, you know.
Kind of the stuff of life.
Yeah. But and I like the idea that somebody else can see something and see that there's, you know, what is this, you know, how did this come about, you know. It's whether you believe in God or no, it's neither here nor there, but the idea that there is something greater than these things that are in front of us.
And it represents that mythology, whether
Yeah.
you believe it or not, it is a mythology.
Yeah, it is. That's, in some ways, it's a mythology, you know, and different. You get different ones take. If it's true what they say, they're all on the same path, you know. They're just different paths.
And it's almost like the trees are casting the light, rather than the sun casting the light in the back.
Yeah. It's coming from inside, as opposed to. I mean, I do get mixed up with that sometimes. You know, you're painting away and you've got a light source, you know, and you think you need to remember that light source because it hits that. But then it looks better if the light's coming from the other side in the tree, and it obviously doesn't make sense, but it doesn't matter.
But lyrically.
Poetically, okay, yeah.
I'd like to just pick up on, I think, some common themes between the two of you. One of them being isolation. Now, we've spoken a little bit, Louis, about the lack of figures in your paintings, particularly in the cityscapes. Although we may have a little bit of a competition later, see if you can find the two figures, spot the figures in the Cowgate.
To me, that's what's striking, is that there's no people in them.
Yeah, it was funny. I mean, I've never really put figures in at all, but it was, and I should have done, but I never. It's quite difficult to paint a cityscape when, I mean, there's all parked cars everywhere, you know. So you're trying to paint it without the parked cars, you know. So you're just getting rid of them. And it was funny seeing images during lockdown when nobody was on the street, and I thought my paintings have came true, you know. It's a prophecy.
Across my mind, you know?
Yeah, it's a prophecy. It's came true, you know. And I did. I could have broke the rules and out and taken some pictures, and some people did. And when I looked at them, I thought, oh yeah, I can see. And the dude, I just felt they detracted from the actual architecture and the power and the space as well, you know. But sometimes it is good to put a wee figure in to show you how big something is, because it gives you something to scale it against, you know.
But you do that with doorways and vehicles.
Yeah, windows, yeah.
Windows and doors
Yeah.
and vehicles that you've done. It's like a few sheep on the hill, quite frankly.
It's too harsh for sheep. But I mean, another thing that we were talking about, you're talking about things in common, and you're talking about music, and I remember, well, for a start, we were talking about influences earlier, and if somebody asks your influence, I mean, one of my, I don't know if they're influences, but I certainly like them, was the Barbizon School, you know, which were just sort of impressionists. They all went to Fontainebleau and painted there, and it was all these dark sort of things. But when somebody asks your influences, the other thing was like, it's really difficult. You know, you mentioned Mr. Ben and stuff like that, which just, and I remember Mr. Ben as well, you know. And the other thing was like album covers, you know. It's like, you don't know, but you'd pick up an album and you go, that's cracking, I mean, even some of Pink Floyd's albums, that they're surreal images, and you think, what is going on there? It's just so intriguing, Jethro Tull, some of their album covers and stuff like that, you think that it's a woodcut, say, it is a piece of art, and oh, that's cracking, and so it's really difficult to find a thing that really did affect you, music. And speaking about music, and when I was at college, somebody gave me a violin, and I mean, I don't play musical instruments, but as an adult, I went up to, I think it was Adult Learning Centre up in Gorgie Way, and tried to learn the violin, just before the kids were born. And I did like the idea that when, a bit like colour and painting, when two notes go together, they really create a beauty, and if you're off, it really creates a jar, and in painting you can work that to your advantage, if you can make it jarish, or you can make something just mellow in, it's like certain painters, I was trying to think, is it Morandi, who done the vases and stuff like that, they're just all these simple tones with just a slight difference in each one, and it's just like a beautiful piece of music, you know what I mean? It's just, there's something beautiful, they just all sit together right, nothing sticks out, nothing, and so I do think I like that idea about music, and I think music in that way sort of influences you a wee bit as well.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that when a painting is complete, like when a piece of music is complete, like when a piece of writing is complete, or at least the artist is ready to part with it, let's say, it then no longer belongs to the artist, no longer belongs to the creator. It's the relationship between the person who's viewing that piece of art, what they read into it, and the stories that they can tell or that they can relate to. Yeah,
I think maybe titles is quite handy for that as well, because I quite like quirky titles as well. I like titles that maybe give it it makes somebody look at something slightly different if the titles, but I think it is up to the viewer sometimes to find their own way in the painting, you know what I mean, and you can't dictate it, and maybe that's one of the things, back to the realism again, is realism can tend to focus the viewer into a mindset, whereas if it's no a realist painting, 10 people can see 10 different things in it, as opposed to if it's too realist, 10 people see the same thing in it, and I sort of quite like that.
I think it's also quite nice that in this gallery you don't have that little artist commentary. That tries to tell you what to think. They put in museums and posh galleries. I quite like being able to see that.
Just have the title.
There's that, on that subject, I got, it's interesting getting somebody else that takes you to see something new that you wouldn't have done, and a friend of mine who's an English guy who lives in Holland, and he says, we're going to this museum you like it, you really like it. It's in a country area in Dusseldorf.
All right.
So I went to this place, and it wasn't an idyllic park or anything like that, but it was an old nuclear sort of war type buildings for a missile system. There were brick buildings and really unusual shape in this sort of country park, and in all the rooms they had this really airy feel to them, but they had no labels about the stuff, very little information at all, and they had all these objects that had been kind of created. There was not many in the room, but it could have been it was something maybe Chinese from whatever dynasty probably, and it was a big ceramic piece, and then there'd be something like a tangly kinetic sculpture, and you think, well, you couldn't explain why that went together, but it did go together, and you were just enjoying all the objects for
them being there, and you've been there,
what you thought of them, and that's one of my favourite museums, because you automatically want to read that.
And I mean, I think the other thing with labels is it's a different type of art. I mean, I like the crafter painting, and I do like that. And when you look at it, hopefully you don't need a label, you know. It's no the same as like looking at maybe a Tracy Emin where you'd maybe need, but I always thought that goes on to, it's like art philosophy. It's more about the intellect, it's more about, it's talking about something else, you know, and it's no about what I would call painting, you know, it's no painting as such, it's just more about the art, the philosophy of art, or the art of philosophy, you know, and sometimes you know, you see a huge book on this piece, you know, and you think, if I can't, art for me is something visual. I want to get it when I look at it. I don't want to have to look through, you know, and get the meaning of it, you know what I mean? So, again, it's a different type, but I do like the idea that when you see it, even if you don't get it all, you get the gist of it, you know. That's, you know.
I like the artist's name, the picture's name, what media it is, and the price.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I like to. Yeah.
Because you may not have painted the Father, Son and Holy Ghost in the picture, but I definitely get it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with you, but I didn't deliberately go out to paint that. But like I say, when the viewer views it, they're seeing the rain thing, you know.
I don't need you to tell me
It's not I
don't need you to tell me it's something different if I wanted that painting.
Yeah.
Because of what I saw in it.
Yeah.
Not because what you painted in it.
I think the other thing is as well, it is difficult to explain a visual language in words, you know what I mean, and somebody else had said it, and it was a quote I think that I remembered that Frank Zappa had said about, you know, try to understand architecture through words, try to understand music through words is like trying to understand architecture through dance. You know, it's until you've, you know, I can tell you what it's like, I can hang with, but until you see it, you're not going to get it. You know what I mean?
That's where I imagine he grew up.
Yeah.
Well,
very similar colours, actually, very similar landscape.
My dad was a landscape painter, sort of remember pointing out anyway that a lot of these natural rhythms would inform a lot of, you know, the mood, like art, you know, architecture, these like an idea, like the Holy Trinity or whatever it is. So the idea has got a kind of rhythm which is similar to the visual thing. You know, or similar, like you're saying, to the way that these plants would behave. Just simply to structure themselves in that space. It's like if you, I don't know, if you go down to like Yellow Craigs down the road, and you see some of the trees, they're actually grown at the angle of the, you know, the wind. I actually thought it was the wind, but somebody told me it's the salt spray on the bark that affects their growth. So that side is slower in growing, and that side grows faster. So they sort of grow at an angle, and it is they adopt to their environment.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that is us coming up to time almost. I'd just like you to, if you have any further questions for Arran and for Louis, please, now's your chance. Otherwise, in a few minutes' time, we'll take a further break for you to either mosey on home if you wish to do so, or hang around and chat with these two fine gentlemen as well.
I'd just like to say I like the way you brought together two completely different styles that work really well with each other.
Thank you.
That was a stroke of genius.
That's the gallery owner. They take
The divers, but I was intrigued by that one the first time I moved in here. That's the other one I can't afford. I don't have print views, but I have that one.
Talked a lot about music and you know, kind of influence of it, and that somebody once said that the birds looked a bit like musical creation. All I can think of is that the first 5 birds there basically play Close Encounters.
When I was working on it, I did think of ideas like the you know, the lark ascending, you know, something relating to birds, that you would not only be looking at them, but you'd be looking at a piece of music that was about them as well, you know.
The lark ascending is just almost one thing.
I wish you hadn't said that. The music is always a scary thing about horror films, isn't it? As well, that's the combination of the two. You know, if you turn the sound off, it's fine.
Well, they become funny if you turn the sound off, don't you? They just become odd sort of things, you know.
Yeah.
I really like how you captured like the permanence of a building, capturing the essence. Like, for example, I like taking photos for my own pleasure without showing them to anyone. One of the things I really like is not having people in them.
Yeah.
And it's because I like to show like the essence of what it's like to be there, not.
Yeah.
Because if the focus is the people, you focus on the people.
Yeah.
So I really, looking at your paintings, it gives me that impression of it's about how this has stand through time.
Yeah.
And it might never be this way again. Time will change, but it's
Yeah.
just highlighting that permanence and impermanence.
Yeah, I think I do like that idea as well, that people have came and went and that building's remained the same, you know. I mean, I do think about that sometimes, especially some of the older buildings, and you think, God knows what on in there, you know, especially in the Cowgate, you know, just the poverty and the destruction and the, you know, and then it just moves over and they're students' flats now, you know what I mean? And it's like, wow, you know, if they're still there in another 100 years, there might be something else, you know, but just people have moved in and out of them all the time.
I think this is something that fundamentally represents a dichotomy in your work, Louis, in that behind the scenes and literally behind windows, behind closed doors, there's a whole ton of people stories that you've been talking about quite eloquently tonight. And yet you don't feature the people necessarily in the painting. So I think that plays into a little bit of almost the common, I don't want to get too depressing or anything like that, but almost the common theme of isolation and observation.
Yeah, definitely.
That the pair of you share.
I think observation though is it has to be some sort of loneliness in observation, because you can't observe in a group, you know what I mean? You can only observe, and if you've ever tried to figure out what's observing is a really difficult thing, you know, to what is it, who is observing, you know? I'm looking through a pair of eyes that I was born with, but who is doing the observing, you know? And I think it is very insular. And I think, as you say, you know, isolative in that as well. And it's like part of the course, you know.
I think what ties you both together is kind of the timelessness.
Yeah,
because
time.
that could be taken at any time at all. That could be in 19th, 18th, 20th, 21st century, and that one even more, and the nature ones.
Yeah.
And the same with the ones with this strange wee land. They're just timeless. They're past, future.
Yeah, I like that idea. I like that idea.
I like that in a painting. I like timelessness.
I like the connection of you could be the diver in this painting. That it's you exploring that like permanence, right? Like that isolation in both of them.
Yeah. But never put an astronaut in the only work. It's a kind of there is a kind of isolation about these. And it's a bit ghostly actually as well, Anka. It's a ghostly.
I'm really a contentment. I wouldn't say happiness, because happiness is one of these transient things. You know what I mean? It's neither here nor there. You know, because no. Yeah.
Sort of Dutch thing a bit, isn't it?
Definitely, I do like the Dutch. I like the Dutch realists, you know. I do, and I think the frames, they sort of relate to that as well. They're sort of Dutch frames. I do like that. Was the other favourites apart from the Barbizon was the Dutch realists. Like, you know, they were good. They tend to put figures in them a lot. But
it's not that Dutch realists and Rousseau. What
do you expect from us those? This is it.
They're very self-aware as well. Like that contentment is like being present there. Like you can't escape the moment. Anyone. Like you have to be there observing what's in front of you. And I really like how they come together in that sense.
I mean, it is good to hear folk talking about them, because it does, you know.
There than there.
In the Warham. Yeah. I mean, I did think about that. Yeah. No, Edinburgh on a summer's day, brilliant hot. Yeah. You don't get many lemon trees down the Cowgate, really, do you?
Not yet.
Unless it's the name of a pub.
Might happen one day, the way things are going.
Yeah, climate change.
There you go.
It's funny we were talking about earlier on, like chance and that. You talked about Fabricius. And,
and an accident happens.
Obviously, he came to a sudden end with, and how that was just a freak, like same way the Raft of Medusa. Folk with short careers and suddenly, and the way a lot of art that's sort of presented by these, I think a lot of these big financial guys, is that somehow this person was destined to do this, and it's, it's like, it's not like that. Life's not like that. You could
That's
get.
the trouble with artists, we die young. Look at Sinead O'Connor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You just don't know.
No.
But that's the interesting thing as well, though, isn't it?
Have a studio next to a dynamite factory.
Aye, well, that's it. Yeah. But having said that, you see that image. The bullfinch is really popular. Would he have been that? I think he was a pupil of Rembrandt, wasn't he?
Goldfinch.
Goldfinch.
That's a finch, isn't it?
Yeah, they're finches, but they're not all. I mean, I do.
They're not real finches. They're just finchy finches.
Well, they're not. I'm not sure what you mean. If they're real, they're.
Are they specific finches?
They look pretty goldfinch-like from a.
Yeah. I would say they were goldfinches. Yeah. I think they were blue tits, and the other ones were magpies. I quite like magpies. Magpies are good because.
I'm good with owls.
Well, they're black and white with your colour scheme, so it's going to look pretty dramatic.
What, magpies? Yeah, the other thing I liked about magpies was the whole superstition of things. You're talking about kids' programmes there, and I always remember Magpie and the song that went with it, and that was only because they copied Blue Peter. That's why they called it Magpie, because they'd ripped somebody else off, but I do, maybe it's the Catholic upbringing, but you get the, you do become superstitious, and obviously not to the point where it's OCD, but you see a magpie and you think, oh, there's another one. Oh, that's all right then. But also you don't let it get to you that if you only see one, you go, oh no, that's my day ruined, But so I do like them, and as you say, they're visually quite striking.
Also, that like the finch, it's obviously got connotations as well. You'd probably be aware of that with the Fabricius one. That one of the theories Colin Bailey, who's a professor, he's a really good speaker on Dutch masters.
Okay.
And they had this show up there with the Fabricius, and I went round with it, and it was interesting to see what he said. And what he said about it was different to the label. We're talking about labels. And he said, he read it, and I said, well, what do you think of that? And he went, I'll tell you what I think. So he says, he thought that was a secret icon, because Vermeer was married. Fabricius, it was for a Catholic client probably who would have kept that as a secret altarpiece. Right. Okay. And that's what he thought, and I thought that is what it's from. You just feel that's what it's about. But as he said, a lot of all of these facts, he says, I analyse paintings obviously, and he's really fluent. He says, one thing that never you can't explain beyond a certain point. He says the big, great paintings, and they get to a point where it's very abstract. You can't. You can't really go beyond that point.
I mean, I know the symbolism. Well, I don't know all the symbols, but I know the Victorians used a lot of symbolisms in their flowers and stuff like that. And in a scene they would put certain flowers that meant certain things. And I sort of like that idea, but. Obviously you're not aware of it a lot. There's a lot of things that I do that I'm not aware of. Or just I don't know about them. And like you say, somebody else comes along and says, do you know that means what? And you go, oh right, okay. That changes it for me as well, you know.
Yeah.
It means the next painting, well, I'll have that now in my mindset a wee bit, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's, sorry to butt in there, but I think that's a good spot to leave it, at least for this formal conversation.
Nice.
Just to let you know, the next in our series of artist talks will feature Gail Olding and Trina Bohan, and they're featured in our next exhibition, our festival exhibition. And that talk, the exhibition itself, the private view is on the 3rd of August, exhibition opens the 4th, and this next talk with another couple of wonderful artists will be on the 10th. So, Louis, Arran, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Come along.